Going into the upcoming 2024-2025 NBA season, the team with the current best odds to bring home that coveted NBA Finals championship is the Boston Celtics, who will look to go back-to-back after winning it all last season. And at plus 300 odds, with the next closest team being at plus 750, it's clear that Vegas is definitely pretty confident the Celtics can get it done. But after looking at this, it got me thinking, how often do these preseason NBA championship odds end up actually panning out? And how have the teams chosen as the preseason favorites to win the finals historically done? Well, today I'm going to be answering these questions by looking at every preseason NBA Finals favorite since 2010 and analyzing how their season went and how they actually finished. How many were able to live up to the hype going into the season, and how many wound up falling short of expectations. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more sports content. Now without further ado, let's dive in. Going into the 2010-2011 season, the team with the best odds to win the NBA championship was the Miami Heat at plus 175 odds. The team returned many familiar faces from the previous season, such as their longtime franchise cornerstone Dwayne Wade, along with other solid contributors like Mario Chalmers, Udonis Haslem, and James Jones. However, what really launched this team to championship favorite status was their incredible haul in free agency, most notably with the additions of star big man Chris Bosh and of course LeBron James. Additionally, the Heat also brought in a few role players like Mike Miller to really round out the rotation. And when the season finally tipped off, the Miami Heat for the most part were living up to expectations. The big three was performing very well, with LeBron and Wade both finishing top 10 in MVP voting. The rest of the roster was also filling their roles admirably, and the team cruised to a 58-24 record, good enough for the second seed in the Eastern Conference. And when the postseason rolled around, they continued right where they left off with back-to-back-to-back 4-1 series wins over the Sixers, Celtics, and Bulls. The team had made it to the finals as expected, but their last test would be a tough one against the very experienced and veteran-heavy Dallas Mavericks, led of course by Dirk Nowitzki. And unfortunately for the Heat, their big three was never really able to find their rhythm during the series, with Bosh and James in particular both putting up less than stellar performances. And ultimately, the Heat would end up falling to the Mavs in 6 games, falling just short of their championship expectations going into the season. Moving on to the 2011-2012 season, the Miami Heat were once again chosen as the preseason favorites to win the NBA Finals, this time at a little bit lower odds of plus 225. This was essentially a run-it-back year for the Heat. The roster had for the most part stayed the same, the big three was back of course, and they managed to keep their bench mostly intact, with the only real notable change being the addition of Shane Battier to the lineup. And in a lockout-shortened season, the Heat managed to have another strong regular season, with the big three performing well yet again, and LeBron even taking home his third career MVP award. And they'd go on to finish the season with a 46-20 record and once again being the second seed in the East. Moving into the playoffs, unlike the previous year, the Heat would have a much more challenging path to the finals. After a 4-1 series win over the Knicks in the first round, the Heat in the second round overcame the Pacers in a 6-game series, and in the conference finals had to play catch-up in the series against the Celtics, winning 4-3. And after all this, the Heat found themselves back in the finals, this time matching up against a young, talented Thunder team led by Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. And in their return to the finals, the Heat looked much more under control and ready for the moment. After losing the first game of the series, the Heat strung together 4 consecutive wins to bring home the championship, and be the first preseason favorite in this video to get the job done. After successfully bringing home a championship the previous year, in the season that followed, the Miami Heat would once again be considered the favorite to win the title, having the same odds at plus 225, and they definitely looked primed to make another run. Their big three was still in their primes, and they managed to bring in some additional firepower during the offseason, adding the Birdman Chris Anderson, as well as Ray Allen, who, as I'm sure most of us know, would be a very important piece throughout the season. And in year 3 of the Bosh, Wade, and James big three, the team put together their strongest regular season yet, finishing with a 66-16 record, good enough for the first seed in the Eastern Conference. Not only that, but LeBron was awarded MVP for the second year in a row. The team was absolutely rolling, and they continued that into the playoffs, dropping just 1 game in the first 2 series. They would be put to the test by a Paul George-led Pacers team in the conference finals, but they would eventually prevail, winning the series in 7 games. So now, for the 3rd year in a row, the Miami Heat were in the finals, this time having to face the San Antonio Spurs, who sported a big three of their own with Tim Duncan, Harden, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili, not to mention an upcoming star in Kawhi Leonard. And the team was of course led by legendary coach Greg Popovich, so being able to defend their championship was going to be no easy task. And this would go on to be one of the greatest final series in NBA history, going all the way to 7 games and featuring countless iconic moments, including Ray Allen's absolutely clutch shot in Game 6 to keep the Heat's championship hopes alive. And after a hard-fought series, the Heat were able to pull it out, winning 4-3, completing the coveted feat of back-to-back championships. Going into the 2013-2014 season, the team viewed as the favorite to win the NBA Finals was, for the 4th year in a row, the Miami Heat, this time at even better odds of plus 200. Much of this confidence from the Oddsmakers came from the fact that the Heat managed to keep pretty much their whole lineup together. Top to bottom, this was almost the same exact team as the previous season, with the only notable addition being the return of Michael Beasley. And to start the season, the team was not only back-to-back champions, but they were now getting into the territory of becoming a dynasty if they managed to win their 3rd straight finals. And to start the season, the Heat certainly looked to be on that path, getting off to an impressive 43-14 record to start the season. However, the team did falter a little bit to close the year, going just 11-14 in their final 25 games. This was definitely a bit alarming, but once the postseason rolled around, those concerns quickly vanished as they cruised pretty comfortably through the first 3 rounds, dropping just 3 games along the way. But in the finals, they found themselves in a rematch against the San Antonio Spurs, looking for revenge the second time around. And unfortunately for the Heat, they found themselves too overmatched this time around, falling to the Spurs in a disappointing 4-1 series loss. This would mark the end of the Big 3 era in Miami, with LeBron departing in free agency the following offseason. Going now into the 2014-2015 season, there would be a new team listed atop the favorites to win the finals, and that would be the Cleveland Cavaliers at plus 275 odds. On paper, this seemed absolutely crazy as the Cavs had finished with a losing record the previous 4 seasons. But if there's one man in the NBA that can single-handedly flip the fortunes of a franchise, it's LeBron James, who, as mentioned earlier, left Miami Heat in free agency and decided to return to Cleveland. And he was joining a Cavs team that had loads of potential. They already had their star point guard in Kyrie Irving, alongside other promising young pieces like Tristan Thompson and Matthew Dellavedova. And in the offseason, several additions were made to bolster the lineup, most notably Kevin Love, who is expected to be the 3rd big piece alongside LeBron and Kyrie. However, despite all the talent they brought in, the Cavs got off to a really slow start, sitting at a disappointing 19-20 record around halfway into the season as they dealt with injuries and chemistry issues. However, the second half of the season would see them turn things around, with players starting to settle in, as well as a couple midseason trades that brought in key players like J.R. Smith, Iman Shumpert, and Timothy Mozgov. The Cavs would wind up finishing the season as the 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference with a 53-29 record, with the newly formed Big 3 of LeBron, Kyrie, and Love leading the way. And that momentum carried over into the postseason, with the Cavs breezing through the first 3 rounds against the Celtics, Bulls, and Hawks, 2 of them being sweeps. This run wouldn't be without its bumps, however, as Kevin Love would injure his shoulder in the first round and would have to miss the rest of the playoffs. This was definitely a major blow for the Cavs, but nonetheless, they prevailed and found themselves in the finals, going up against a young, upcoming Warriors team with their OG core of Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. However, early on in the series, the Cavs would suffer another catastrophic blow, with Kyrie Irving fracturing his kneecap in Game 1, sidelining him for the rest of the series. At this point, the Cavs essentially became a one-man show with LeBron, who, despite his best efforts, would come up short, with the Cavs suffering a 4-2 loss to Golden State. Moving into the 2015-2016 season, the Cleveland Cavaliers were once again selected as the favorite to bring home a championship. The team had kept most of their core together, with Love and Kyrie coming back from injury, but they also added some nice veteran pieces in Richard Jefferson, Channing Frye, and Mo Williams to provide more depth and experience to the rotation. And unlike the previous season, the Cavs came out the gate swinging, quickly rising to the top of the East before making the bold decision to fire their head coach David Blatt, with assistant coach Tyronn Lue stepping in to replace him. But despite the coaching change, the Cavs kept rolling to a 57-25 record and the first seed in the East. And in the postseason, the Cavs steamrolled their first 2 opponents, sweeping the Pistons and Hawks, before taking down the Toronto Raptors in the conference finals in 6 games. And in the finals, for the 2nd year in a row, they'd find themselves up against the Golden State Warriors. But not just any Warriors team, one that was coming off an NBA record 73-win regular season, led by unanimous MVP Stephen Curry. The Warriors had been unstoppable the entire year, and early on in the finals, it certainly looked like the Cavs were severely overmatched, falling to 3-1 in the series, a mark which no team had ever come back from before. I'm sure most know the story from here though, as the Cavs would storm back, winning 3 straight games to win the finals and avenge their loss from the previous season. For the 2016-2017 season, the team favored to win the championship was, in no surprise to anyone, the Golden State Warriors at -128 odds. Because after suffering one of the biggest collapses in sports history the previous season, the Warriors, a team with a unanimous MVP in Steph Curry, alongside two other All-Stars in Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, pulled off one of the most shocking offseason moves in NBA history, signing former MVP and top 5 player in the league Kevin Durant from the OKC Thunder. This was an absolutely league-breaking signing, as it made the 2016 Warriors squad arguably the most stacked team in NBA history. And this isn't even mentioning the other players on the squad, including former Finals MVP Andre Iguodala, Sean Livingston, Kevon Looney, and David West, just to name a few. Yeah, it's no wonder why this team was favored to win it all. And with this absolutely stacked lineup, the Warriors coasted pretty easily through the regular season, finishing with a 65-17 record, which put them as the first seed in the Western Conference. And the Warriors finished it up with an even more impressive postseason, sweeping their first 3 rounds against the Trailblazers, Jazz, and Spurs. And in the finals, they found themselves up against the Cavaliers for the 3rd straight season. However, things wouldn't be nearly as competitive this time around. All the talent and depth the Warriors had was simply too much for LeBron and the Cavs, as the Warriors would handle them pretty easily, winning the series 4-1, an outcome which many experts and fans saw coming before the season even started. Coming off of an absolutely dominant season, the Golden State Warriors entered the 2017-2018 season once again as the favorites to bring home their 3rd title in 4 years, this time at -187 odds, and it certainly looked like a very likely possibility, with the team bringing back their Fantastic Four, most of their veteran role players, while at the same time also bringing in some youthful contributors like Quinn Cook and Jordan Bell. But unlike the previous year, things wouldn't be so smooth sailing for this 2017 squad. They still finished with a solid record of 58-24 and were the 2nd seed in the West. However, the team dealt with some nagging injuries throughout the season, with Steph Curry in particular missing over 30 games with a sprained MCL. And moving into the playoffs, the Warriors had a much more difficult path to the finals this time around, specifically in round 3 against the Houston Rockets, a series which went all the way to 7 games. But nonetheless, the Warriors were back in the finals, facing up against a familiar foe in the Cleveland Cavaliers. And against a depleted Cavaliers team that was essentially a one-man show with LeBron, the Warriors would once again knock off the Cavs, this time in a 4-0 sweep. Following their back-to-back championships, the Warriors for the 2018-2019 season were once again chosen as the favorites to bring home the championship at -168 odds. This was their 3rd year with the Fantastic Four and also returned most of their bench production, but to the shock of many, the team managed to get even more talented as they somehow managed to pull off signing big man DeMarcus Cousins during free agency. Now, granted, this was a Cousins coming off a pretty severe injury the year prior with the Pelicans where he tore his Achilles, so there were definitely questions on if he'd be back to the player he once was. But still, this was a guy that not too long ago was arguably the best center in the NBA and at the very minimum top 3. So if the Warriors could get even a fraction of the production he had pre-injury, this team would somehow be even more dangerous than they were before. And with all the talent on the roster, the Warriors were pretty much able to cruise through the regular season with the intention of just turning things up in the playoffs when it really mattered. And that's pretty much exactly what they did, finishing the regular season with a solid 57-25 record, good enough to capture the 1st seed in the East. However, it's in the playoffs where the injuries for Golden State really started to pile up, with Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, DeMarcus Cousins, Andre Iguodala, and several other role players suffering significant or even season-ending injuries during the playoff run. Despite the injuries, the Warriors did still manage to fight their way to the finals, where they found themselves up against a talented and determined Toronto Raptors team led by Kawhi Leonard. And unfortunately for the Warriors, despite putting up a good fight, their injuries were just too much to overcome as they'd fall to the Raptors in 6 games. For the first time in 5 years, the 2019-2020 season saw a team not named the Warriors or Cavaliers be listed as the championship favorite, and for this year, it was the Los Angeles Clippers sitting at +425 odds. This is a Clippers team that in one offseason launched themselves into championship favorite status, with the whole thing being kickstarted by the signing of superstar forward Kawhi Leonard from the Raptors, and shortly after trading for another superstar forward in Paul George. Additionally, the Clippers did a good job retaining the talent they already had on their roster with guys like Montrezl Harrell and Reggie Jackson, while also re-signing guys like Patrick Beverley and Lou Williams. This team definitely had the talent and depth to win it all. It was just a matter of if everything could come together. And the Clippers did get off to a pretty strong start to the season, going 49-23 before the NBA temporarily halted operations amidst the COVID pandemic. And when the season finally got started again with the NBA bubble, the Celtics won a hard-fought 6-game series against the Mavericks in the first round, but found themselves in a tough matchup in round 2 against the Nuggets star duo of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. And unfortunately for the Clippers, they would go out in brutal fashion, blowing a 3-1 series lead, losing in 7 games. Certainly a very disappointing end for a team that had so much potential, and interestingly enough, this is actually the first team featured in the video that didn't at least make the finals as the favorite. So sorry Clippers fans. Coming off of a championship the previous season, the favorite to win the 2020-2021 finals was yet another LeBron-led team, the Los Angeles Lakers, with plus 275 odds. And this was a Lakers team that certainly did lose some of their key pieces from the previous season like Rajon Rondo and Dwight Howard. However, they still had their elite 1-2 punch with LeBron and Anthony Davis, along with a strong supporting cast of Dennis Schroeder, Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell, among several others. However, despite the impressive lineup, this Lakers team dealt with a slew of injuries throughout the season, in particular with their top players LeBron and AD combining for over 60 missed games. And without their main duo available for a decent chunk of the season, the team really struggled to be consistent, and would finish the 72-game shortened season with a 42-30 record, barely sneaking into the playoffs as the 7th seed in the West. And the team's inconsistent play would unfortunately follow them into the playoffs, as they'd go on to be eliminated in the first round by the Phoenix Suns. And for the second season in a row, the championship favorite would fail to make it past even the conference finals. For the 2021-2022 season, we would for the third season in a row see a different team chosen as the championship favorite, with it now being the turn of the Brooklyn Nets with odds of plus 240. This was during the era in Brooklyn where they were trying to establish a big three of their own with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. The group had fallen just short the previous season, being eliminated in the conference semifinals, but this was the year that many people thought they'd be able to put it all together and bring home a championship. They had done a pretty good job in the offseason bringing in quality role players like Patty Mills and Paul Millsap to pair with guys like Joe Harris, Bruce Brown, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Nick Claxton, who they already had on the roster. Not to mention drafting a young and promising scorer in Cam Thomas from LSU. So they had several nice pieces to play alongside their big three, but as mentioned earlier, it was just a question of if they'd be able to put it all together. And right from the tip-off for the regular season, it was clear that something just wasn't really working. Whether it was injuries, poor chemistry, their playstyles not really meshing, or a combination of the three, the Nets struggled to stay above 500 throughout most of the season, and they eventually made the decision to scrap their Big Three experiment, trading away James Harden to the 76ers mid-season. But even after a flurry of mid-season trades brought in quality players like Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and Ben Simmons, the team still just never really looked to be in sync, but they would manage to stumble their way into the playoffs as the 7th seed in the West with a 44-38 record. However, their postseason run would come to an end very quickly as they'd be swept in the first round by the Boston Celtics, leading to without a doubt one of the most disappointing seasons for a preseason finals favorite in NBA history. Getting near the end now, the team chosen as the favorite to win the 2022-2023 NBA championship was the Boston Celtics at plus 500 odds. This was a Celtics team that most people had kind of known for a while that they would be championship contenders at some point, and many experts thought that this could be the year where they finally put everything together. They of course had their elite young duo of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, alongside other really solid players like Derek White, Al Horford, Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, among others. It's actually kind of crazy how much depth this team had alongside their star power, so it's pretty easy to see why this team was considered the favorite. The only question surrounding the team was how the newly chosen interim head coach Joe Mazzulla would perform in the absence of current head coach Ime Udoka amidst that whole controversy. But those concerns would quickly be put to rest as the Celtics were firing on all cylinders in the regular season, jumping out to a strong 42-17 record before naming Joe Mazzulla as the full-time permanent head coach moving forward. And at the conclusion of the regular season, the Celtics finished with a record of 57-15, earning the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. However, once the postseason rolled around, the team had to battle through their first 2 series against the Hawks and 76ers, with those series going to 6 games and 7 games respectively. Nonetheless, they found themselves in the conference finals against a red-hot Miami Heat squad led by Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, and Bam Adebayo. And after falling behind in the series 0-3, the Celtics made a valiant comeback attempt, winning 3 straight and forcing a Game 7. But unfortunately, the comeback would fall just short as the Celtics would be defeated in the deciding game. So close to making history and just missing out on making the finals, but many people were confident that they would be back sooner rather than later. And now finishing off with the most recent NBA season, the Boston Celtics once again came into the 2023-2024 year as the championship favorites at plus 450 odds. After suffering a devastating loss in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals the previous season, could this finally be the Celtics team that gets the job done? They made the decision to give up one of their key pieces in Marcus Smart, but in return got themselves a former All-Star big man in Kristaps Porzingis. But other than that, the Celtics are basically running things back with the same team. And right from the jump, everything seemed to be clicking with this 2023 squad. They were pretty much the unquestioned best team in the NBA from start to end. They finished the regular season with an impressive 64-18 record and locked themselves up as the first seed in the East. And that momentum carried over into the postseason as they breezed through the first 3 rounds, dropping just 2 games during their path to the finals. And upon reaching the finals, they found themselves matched up against an impressive Mavericks team featuring the superstar duo of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. However, this Boston team would not be denied this time around, as they pretty comfortably handled the Mavs, defeating them in 5 games, and thus allowing the video to go out on a positive note, with the championship favorite being able to get the job done. So that was every team chosen as the preseason favorite to win the NBA Finals since 2010, and how their season ended up actually panning out. For those not keeping track at home, of the 14 teams favored to win, 10 of them would at the very least make the finals, with only 6 of them being able to actually cash those odds and get the job done. So do with that information as you wish. More than anything, I think it goes to show that preseason projections in the grand scheme of things really don't carry much weight, and when the season actually tips off, you never know what can happen. I'm really excited for this upcoming season, and let me know how much confidence you have putting money down on the Celtics to bring home another championship this year. Be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel for more sports content. If you have any thoughts on the video, be sure to leave a comment down below, alongside other video suggestions you'd like to see. This is HCP signing off. As always, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm out. Peace.